Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. Mike Goldman, welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. So happy to have you on today.
Thanks, Matt. Looking forward to it.
Yes, I look forward to meeting you. We've never met before. I'm a little bit familiar with your work. You currently have your latest book out is Breakthrough Leadership Team. We're all about leadership here at BriteVibe, self-leadership, corporate leadership, home leadership, you name it. We talk about it and the many aspects of that, whether you're leading a team of one or leading a team of thousands, leadership is, I think, an all-encompassing thing that everybody can get better at. So let's talk a little bit about your newest book, Breakthrough Leadership Team. What's that about?
Yeah, the focus of the book is really about what I know, what I believe is, to me, the most important part of building a great company.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about strategy. It is really about building a great leadership team. And I have been coaching and consulting for about 35 years now. The last 15 is my own business as a leadership team coach. And, I kind of woke up one day and always thought about my business as I help companies grow. I work with small and mid-market companies, but woke up one day and said, what I really do is I help build great leadership teams. That's my model. I work with the CEO and the leadership team. So I read a lot of books, and I said, if that's what I do, if I'm really about building great leadership teams, man, I probably ought to read some more books on that, because I can't, thousands, and I went on Amazon. There are thousands of books, of course, on leadership, dozens of books on team building. I could not find one book focused on how you structure a great leadership team, how you find the right people for a leadership team, how you build culture on a leadership team, how you execute as a leadership team. Couldn't find a book written on it. So I said, all right, if that's the book I need and it hasn't been written, I guess I need to write it. So that's what I did.
Interesting. And so those, just, we could dive into each one of those points you just mentioned. So how to build a great leadership team, right? I mean, that's what the work's about. That's what the book's about, but that's what you ultimately do. So let's talk about that. How do you build a great leadership team?
Well, first, let's talk about a little bit about why, and then we'll talk about how and defining what a great leadership team is. I think the reason to build a great leadership team is because you want to build a great company. And that's the way to do it. When I say great company, it is three things. Number one, it's about top and bottom line growth, right? It's not all about the dollars, but man, if you don't have the dollars, you have nothing to fuel anything else you want to do. So you need that top and bottom line growth. Number one. Number two, it's about creating a growing, fulfilling environment for your team. And then number three, after you've done those things, it's about adding real value to society. Society could be your client. Society could be a bigger society. So that's what it's about. And what I coach on, what I believe is there are 6 pillars to creating a great leadership team. And I'll quickly, Matt, take you
please do.
Any of these you want to drill into, we'll drill in. But number one is about self-leadership. You can't lead others. You can't even be part of a great leadership team if you can't lead yourself. So number one is self-leadership. Number two,
do you want to dive into those? You want to discuss them I'd almost like to discuss them as we go, because I'm not going to be able to remember. By the time you get to 6, I'm going to have so many questions.
So let's dive in. And if we only get to 4 or 5,
I think I'll make sure
self-leadership.
We'll get to them. How do you define self-leadership, though? Let's be clear about that. So what's your definition of self-leadership?
Yeah, when I think about self-leadership, I think about three different, I don't want to call them competencies, but 3 different characteristics, I guess, is a great way to think of it. And number one, I call fire. And fire is about having that fire in your belly to do more, be more, set bigger goals, raise the bar. The metaphor I use is you got to find that next dragon to slay.
Right.
So
Yeah,
number one is fire. Number two is focus. And by focus, what I mean is the ability to be proactive in switching your focus from a disempowering focus. For example, a disempowering focus may be, I'm focused on what I don't want.
Right. Which happens a lot. Right.
Right. How do you switch that to an empowering focus, like very simply focusing on what I do want?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Right.
so first part of self-leadership is that fire in your belly. Second is focus. How do you switch from a disempowering to an empowering focus? And the third is coachability. We talk a lot. I talk to my leaders a lot about how they can be better coaches to their people. But when it comes to self-leadership, you have to make sure you're coaching, that you're willing to ask for feedback. You've got that vulnerability. You're willing to hold yourself accountable. You are learning and growing. So the third part of self-leadership is that coachability.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification around that. So that's one, being, what, and how did you describe number one?
Well, one is about mastering
self-leadership.
self-leadership.
All right. Number two.
Number two is proactively structuring the leadership team. And what I mean by that is, normally when an entrepreneur founds a new business, it may be they're doing it. Next step is they got a bunch of part-time or full-time helpers, but they're really running it. And then at some point, they start to realize, oh my God, I need a head of sales. I'm going to hire someone. I need a head of operations. I need somebody to head up service. And then they get to 100 people and they're like, oh my God, everybody's leaving. We have a horrible culture. Do you think maybe I need a head of human resources? And by the way, I hate that HR term. I call it talent management, talent development. But the leadership team kind of evolves. And what I suggest is you need to be proactive about structuring that team. You need to understand, even if you're one person, you probably have 8 or 10 functions within your business. Head of company is a function, sales, marketing, technology, service, finance. There are a bunch of functions, whether you're one employee or whether you've got 1,000 employees. Understanding right now who's accountable for each function, the one person. And if you're a solo entrepreneur, your name is everywhere. But looking at your plan for growth over the next 4, 8, 12 quarters, I call it the 12-quarter leadership team plan. Over the next 4, 8, 12 quarters, what's your plan for growth? And when you look at that plan, being proactive and saying, hey, you know what? I don't need a VP of sales right now, but given the fact that 3 quarters from now, I need to start bringing on 10 new clients per month to hit my growth goals, man, at that point, I'm going to need someone other than me to head up sales. Here's a point 6 quarters from now where I expect we're going to have 75 employees. Probably need to think about having someone who's accountable for recruiting and onboarding and talent management at that point. And the power of doing that is that you understand 2, 3, 4, 5 quarters before you have a need, what that need will be. And you could start grooming internally or hiring the right way, which is hiring slow, as opposed to, oh my God, I need a director of HR yesterday, go find somebody, and then you make a mistake.
Right. Okay. Number three.
Number three is finding the right people. So if you've got the right structure, now I've got to find the right people. And for a leadership team, I believe that leadership team has got to be made up of all A players. If you've got B players on the team, they better have the potential to be A players within 6 months or so. And the reason for that, while I would never say your goal, while it's a nice, so it's something to strive for, say, man, I wish I had all A players, all superstars in my company. If you've got a company of 40, 50, 60, 200 people, to say our goal is 100% A players, that's a stretch, right? You're not going to get there. You might strive for it. You're not going to get there. But I do believe on a leadership team, you need to have an understanding that A players don't work for B players very long.
Right.
So if you have an A player on your leadership team, I'm sorry, if you've got a B player on your leadership
Mm-hmm.
team, or God forbid, a C player on your leadership team, that's got a ripple effect throughout the organization. So you need the tools and techniques to make sure that you're going out there and getting the right people for the function, and you're hiring A players, or at least folks with the potential to become A players pretty quickly.
Right. Makes sense. Yep. And I've heard that before. Yeah. Well, what they say, I think it's faint. I think Bill Gates was, the quote I heard was basically, if A players hire B players and B players hire C players and C players hire D players, we have a company of idiots, right? I mean, we're not going to get anything done. You got to, and typically when I think of that thought, it's always like, I'm always looking to hire up, like who is smarter than me, which is a low bar, but who's got more insight, depth, professionalism, who knows this better than I do, so that I'm one, learning from them, but also I'm not having to do what they do, right? If I'm hiring somebody to do, I see this, I've done it myself when I was a young entrepreneur, and I see it in other entrepreneurs, is always hiring down, because you think that you have to train them. Like, that's the biggest thing. I hear that people say, well, I can just train them. I'm like, okay, why would you? Okay. So basically you're stressed out because you're having to do it now, and then you're going to have to train somebody. Why would you not just look for somebody who has that skill set? Right. And then,
what I find is, the other reason to do that is, if you're a B player, you're fearful of hiring someone better,
right,
smarter
right,
than you, because what's going to happen to your job?
right.
A players, folks that are crazy productive, living the core values every day, adding to the culture, they're all about hiring smarter people so they can
Right.
step back and be more strategic while the smarter folks are running the business. So that's one reason, B players tend to hire C players. And where you want to be is, every time you bring somebody on board to your organization, you want to be raising the average.
Right. Yep. You want to be going the other way. Right. Okay. That's number 3. Number 4.
Number 4 is about building a resilient culture. And that starts on the leadership team. I have leaders come to me and say, how do we fix the culture in the company? Like, we're not fixing anything until we build the right culture on the leadership team, because if you do that, it's going to cascade down. There's still work to do, and down below the leadership team. But if you don't have the right culture on the leadership team, and when I talk about culture, I talk about the 3 V's: values, vision, and vulnerability.
Okay.
Those 3 things, you need a leadership team that is living and breathing those 3 V's. They don't just understand the vision, they're evangelists of the vision. They don't just understand your values as a company, they're a model of those core values. They don't just have good conversations on the leadership team. They're vulnerable enough and trusting enough that they can have crazy, open, brutally honest conversations. So that fourth fourth component of building a great leadership team is building a resilient culture.
Right. And in today's times, that's never been more evident that we need resilient cultures, because you're going to hit something, whether you're being disrupted by industry or disrupted by, supply chain, disrupted by, cycles in the financial markets,
war in the Ukraine, by recession,
right. All of the above, right.
Monkeypox, you name it.
Right. Number 5.
Number 5 is about executing with discipline as a team. It's being able to remove drama from the day-to-day, hold people accountable. I talk about 3 disciplines with my clients in the book, 3 disciplines of execution. One is aligning around a small number of priorities, right? We know if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. Right. So aligning around a small number of priorities, number 1. Number 2, measuring those things that matters. How do I measure success? What are the right key performance indicators to measure how I'm doing, in the business? And the 3rd is having the right planning and communication rhythm. The right structure of when annual planning and quarterly planning and monthly check-in and education and weekly accountability meetings and daily huddles. What's that right rhythm of planning and communication?
And I use this in some of the companies I'm involved in, and also I've watched some of my friends do this, but they're running EOS, right? The entrepreneurial, and I don't know if you recommend that, but I mean, it's a very, I won't say it's entrepreneurial operating system, right? So it's very, one, there's lots of information, tutorials, and videos on it, but I find that it was just super helpful to have just a structure, right? If nothing else, it was, especially for small companies that don't have that bench to do that. It was a fairly easy way to get companies kind of on a regular, to your point, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual. Here's what you need to do. I guess it was almost like running a company for dummies, but I'm not, but I'm referring to the books, not to the actual people running the system.
Yeah, well, EOS is a great model. There are things I do that overlap with the EOS method. And EOS is great. I've read all the books.
Right.
I think when it comes to execution, EOS is terrific. I think there are things that I do and things that are out there around around strategy that go much deeper than an EOS, around talent and people and culture that may go deeper.
Oh, definitely.
EOS for certain companies, EOS is a wonderful tool. I sometimes compete with their coaches, so it'd be great for me to put them down, but I won't. It's a great set of tools, and I use some of them.
Yeah, right. And the sixth, what's the sixth thing?
The sixth one is developing and improving as a team, continuously developing and improving. So the sixth is about assessing your talent. Number one, with my clients, we do a talent assessment every quarter where we look one level down from that leadership team. Who are the A players, B players, C players, and what I call toxic C players. And we use a tool that I specifically designed for that. So developing and improving is about assessing your talent, coaching your talent, developing your talent, and when need be, making that hard decision to cut the cord on folks that don't belong on the team.
Right. Of course. And so what, with the companies you're working with currently, what's the most, kind of what's the top of mind awareness or challenge that they're dealing with right now? I know in our companies, it's, employee hiring and retention is huge, and competing with, the current wage stuff that's happening in the health. I'm mostly in healthcare, in the healthcare market, but what are you seeing in the companies that you're involved with?
Yeah, I also think it's people related. And I think it's kind of two sides of the coin. One is, it is really tough to go out and find and keep the right people these days. So it's important that you have a process and some accountabilities and some tools to do that really well. But the other side of it, and to some degree, one causes the other, but not fully. The other side of it is keeping way too many low B, C, toxic C players that have been around for 6, 12, 18 months, hurting the organization, and they're still there. And I'll talk to leaders and find out they've never even coached these people. It's like, why are they still here? Well, I really haven't talked to them about it yet. How long have they been a problem? Oh, the last year, it's really been bad. Really? And I get it emotionally. Logically, it makes no sense. I get it emotionally because I know, and I call this the C player trap. I know if I make the hard decision I know I need to make about that C player, now I got to go find somebody else.
Right. Yep.
And I've got to train them and onboard them. And man, that's a pain in the neck. So you know what? Maybe I can keep them around a little longer. Maybe they'll do some more coaching. And that I see is the biggest issue, because when you're keeping those folks around who are holding the company back from a culture standpoint or from a productivity standpoint or both, who are you hurting? Mostly you're hurting your A players.
Right.
Because your A players now have more work to do.
Right.
Here's the kicker. Many of your A players will become B players because they're like, hey, what am I working so hard for? If you're keeping Joe around, who hasn't done anything in the last year,
it's demotivating.
More likely, because not a lot of A players want to become B players, more likely they're gone.
Right.
And now they're your competition. So So having a structure where you're assessing your talent, coaching and developing, but knowing when the right time is to make that hard decision. And as a leadership team, holding each other accountable to make those hard decisions. That's not an easy thing to do, but it's critical.
Right. Of course. And what are there other things that you're really keyed in on right now in this current environment that you see companies, challenges that you really see them struggling with?
And there's really nothing as much as we know the world has gone crazy over, over the last 2.5, 3 years or whatever it's been. I don't see that big a difference in the challenges companies had. They had these people challenges before.
Yep.
Before the great resignation or whatever we're calling it today.
Right.
Companies are horrible at hiring the right people, keeping the right people, losing the right people. Companies were and are still really making mistakes around execution. There's no regular rhythm. How do I hold people accountable? What do I need to do? Fire everybody? Well, show me where you've been clear about your expectations for that person. Oh, they know what they're supposed to do. Really? So having the right rhythm around planning quarterly to set a small number of priorities. How are you going to hold people accountable? How are you going to measure? That's always been an issue. It continues to be an issue. Maybe the one that's a bigger issue now is the culture.
Right.
No surprise, right? And a lot of that is, number one, when COVID happened, some companies really took that crazy challenging time and built a better, more resilient culture by communicating with their people more and supporting their people and all the things they needed to do. And others did the opposite. Others were just like, I'm going to crawl under my desk and wait for this to be done. And people said, now I know what my leaders are really about. And I'm not thrilled with that. So it started there where some companies improved their culture, some companies killed their culture. And now obviously you've got the problem of remote and or hybrid work environments where building those relationships with your employees, and culture is all about those relationships. Building those relationships, what I found is for employees that have been there a while, you could keep relationships over Zoom.
Right. For somebody who's already indoctrinated into the culture, been with the company, they get it. They know what's going on.
Yeah, you could do that. And it takes work, but not overwhelming. You can keep those relationships, keep that culture. But when it comes to onboarding new employees, and this has been going on a while now, employees that have been around in your company 2.5 years may have never been in the same room.
Right.
Bringing on new employees, building relationships over Zoom is really difficult. It's not impossible. It's difficult. And there are companies now, certainly, as we know, a lot of companies have hybrid environments. And what they've done is said, every Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to be in the office. Great. I'm for that. I unlike my 26-year-old daughter who wants the rest of her life to be working from home, I see the value, right?
In being together. And the relationship. Yeah.
But the problem is companies say, okay, every Wednesday and Thursday, we're all going to be in the office. But then what do they do when they're in the office? People are doing the same work they did Monday and Tuesday.
Right.
So people are like, wait a minute, I spent an hour and a half on a back and forth commute.
Right.
And I could have done this more productively at home because I have, less interruptions. Like, what am I doing this for? So I think the key, and I don't think anybody knows the answer yet. It's too early on, but I think a hybrid environment's here to stay. We're not going back to the way it was. And I think it's going to take a whole lot of data gathering, a whole lot of mistakes, a whole lot of experiments to figure out what should we be doing in the office on Wednesday and Thursday that leverages the fact that we're here together. Shouldn't be the same work we can do remotely. There's different work we should be doing to collaborate together, to build those relationships. And that doesn't just mean, great, so every Thursday, we'll have an ice cream party in the afternoon. It's not just about doing fun stuff on the Wednesday and Thursday, although that's wonderful. I think we're going to learn, and I don't know the answers yet. We're going to learn how to change the work we do
Right.
on those days we're in the office, change the work we do on those days we're outside the office to best leverage both of those things, the remote work, the in-person work, and to continue to build the strong cultures. Because as you alluded to earlier, culture has always been important. But when I talk about building a resilient culture, as the rate of change continues to speed up, and I feel like I've been saying that for 30 years, change, the only thing that's not changing is the speed of change or whatever. Yes, change is happening faster, but it just seems like it's been wilder swings back and forth. And I don't know that ends. I'm going to assume it's not going to end. We're going to have those wild swings. So building a resilient culture becomes critically important.
And by resilient, let's just dive into that. I love words and the deeper meaning behind them. But in your definition of resilient, what is true resiliency? So a company that's doing it right, what does that look like when we say resiliency?
So when I look at the word resilient, the picture that gets painted most of the time is the ability to take a hit, the ability to deal with an incredibly challenging time and bounce back from that.
Right.
And I think that's okay. That definition's fine. I like to take it a step further. And when I say resilient culture, I want the problems, the challenges, the world events, the COVIDs, the recessions, the whatever. I don't want to just bounce back to where we were. I want the culture we have and the vulnerability within that culture, the values within that culture, the vision of an amazing place you're going to get to and the value you're going to add. I want all those problems to cause you to bounce back and be even stronger than you were before. That's the way I see it. Not just the ability to take a punch and get up, but the ability to take a punch, get up, and somehow be stronger than before you took that punch.
And I think that what's the industry term now? Disruption, right? So, I hear a lot about that, but I think obviously the last 3 years has been its own disruption without having necessarily a lot of, other, like, just straight up corporate to corporate disruptions. There's all the underlying things, right, that are going on. So, the phrase, you're either the disruptor or the disruptee. If you're not disrupting yourself, somebody else is about ready to disrupt your industry. And I think that's part of the resilient. When I think of resilience, that kind of is there too. It's like, it's not, what are you doing to make sure that you're more resilient? And if you're not, when I say disrupting, if you're not looking at your, where do we need to shore up our strengths and how can we become more resilient? And I think COVID was a prime example for a lot of companies of testing that, right? How resilient are we? And we saw companies, I had companies that failed during COVID. We also had companies that were resilient, that actually got stronger as a leadership team, got stronger in their operation sense, learned how to manage, got tighter on expenses, learned how to negotiate harder on contracts, right? So they actually came out stronger. So yeah, what are we doing internally with our companies to make them stronger? Not knowing that the status quo is no longer, it's just not, the status quo isn't going to cut it anymore for more than, I would guess, a year or two before a company starts to see some major decline in it, if they're not constantly thinking about how do we get more resilient, I guess is my point.
And this is also where not only, when I talk about culture, I talk about resilient culture, but part of the resiliency and the way you and I are talking about it comes from the right planning and communication.
Right.
I come from a world of, first half of my career, management consulting, working with Fortune 500 companies. We would spend millions of dollars on beautiful strategic 3 to 5 year strategic plans that sat on a shelf and gathered dust. And the reason they did is because 3 months after that was created, the world changed and the plan didn't make sense anymore.
Right.
So one of the keys to resilience is, it's not planning, right? Some CEOs like, you know what? I'm not even going to, we're not creating a plan because I don't know what's going to happen 3 months from now. That's true. You don't. What I do is absolutely, there's longer term visioning, but the anchor of you, not like the anchor, the key to your planning is quarterly planning.
Mhm.
Typically,
Yeah.
typically, the
Yeah.
world doesn't change all that much in
And
3
then
months.
90, right.
And creating a set of quarterly every 90, and with my clients, every 90 days,
Mhm.
we do, and I coach them through a 2-day planning
Mhm.
sessions. Leadership team gets together for 2 days every quarter, look back at how we're doing, what's coming up. Let's create the plan. Let's make sure that plan aligns with where we want to go longer term. But the 90-day planning, it's enough of a sense of urgency that you got your fire up your butt to really get some things
Mhm.
done.
Mhm.
But it's a short enough period of time that you could focus. The world is typically not going to change all that much in 3 months. And doing that 3-month planning allows you to zig and zag
Mhm.
along the way to get to a longer term vision. Or when need be, you might need to reevaluate that long term vision.
Of course. Yeah. And I have heard that from, the industry leaders that I'm associated with, that they're still looking at forecasting, right? Versus planning. There's still forecasting happening,
Yep.
but that forecasting is always that tongue in cheek. Okay, this is going to be our target with the information we have today, right? And and they are taking those. I don't see anybody doing 5-year plans anymore. I really don't. Or 10-year plan. Forget it. You can have your vision, where your company's headed. That's different than having the executable plan that you're going to execute. Nobody's executing a plan for 10 years anymore. Nobody's executing a plan for 5 years anymore. Because to your point, things change so rapidly that's like, so let's not get so focused on the how, or in my opinion, let's not get so focused on the how and get focused on, okay, this is our vision and this is what the target. We're going to have to be flexible on the how, right? We're going to have to allow that to zig and zag a little bit because the market's zigging and zagging a little bit. So that's at least what I'm seeing. Yeah. And the thing, and so I've got one question, and then I want to throw you some just my own curiosity stuff. So the question I'll pose is for a newer business owner, newer entrepreneur, or the solo entrepreneur, because you mentioned this earlier in the show about, if you're the only one, I see what I've been seeing from the podcast and from just looking around in society. It seems like that's the one area of business that seems to me underserved is those solo entrepreneurs or newer entrepreneurs, new business owners. There's the support system of there's just so much information, but what of it is credible out there, right? So, if somebody's just starting a business, is like you can Google start a business and you're going to have more information at your disposal than anybody's had in the history of the world as far as how to start a business. But what's actual practical, right? What's practical and what we should really focus on. So for that solo entrepreneur, what's the most critical things that you think that they should be thinking about?
A community of folks
Mm-hmm.
that will support them. I don't
Interesting.
think there's anything more, it's not about make sure you come up with the right strategy. Make sure
Mhm.
that first
Mhm.
hire is an A player. There's a
Right.
1,000 things people are going to tell you. Some of
Mhm.
them are right. A
Mhm.
lot of them are right, but it's overwhelming. You can't
Right.
do 176 things. The biggest mistake I made when
Mhm.
I started my first
Mhm.
business 18 years ago was I'm a smart guy. I could figure this out.
Mhm.
Didn't work
Mhm.
out all that well.
Right. Yeah.
So
I've done that.
having the right community to support you, and that's everything from your professionals, the right
Yep.
accountant and the
Yep.
right
Yep.
attorney and all that stuff. It's having a coach
Mhm.
is so important.
Mhm.
I'm a coach and I've
Right.
had a coach for the better part of the last 16, 17
Right.
years. I've had a couple of different coaches and a
Right.
coach. So having those professional services folks, having a coach that
Mhm.
can help challenge you, pat you on the
Mhm.
back when you need it, kick you in the ass when you need it, open
Mhm.
your eyes to some new ways of looking at things. Family is important. Right
Mhm.
now, this is, you
Mhm.
can't, you can pick a coach, you can't pick your family, right?
Mhm.
But I will tell you, my first business was a 3-year miserable failure.
Right.
And there were plenty of times that I thought, man, I just need to go out and get a job.
Mhm.
This isn't going to
Mhm.
work. When I
Mhm.
started my coaching business, it took me a while to get it going.
Mhm.
And my wife I've been lucky enough to be married to for 32 years,
Mm-hmm.
was the most supportive
Mm-hmm.
person you could imagine. And she's very conservative with money, and I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I thought she was going to say, cut the crap and go find a job.
Yep.
And when I'd say, honey, I'm not sure how we're paying the mortgage
Mm-hmm.
this month. We're in
Mm-hmm.
trouble. I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
to do. She'd just be like, you're doing great. You're going to keep going. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop hiring the guy to mow the lawn. We're going to do
Right.
this. We're going to cut that out.
Right.
And just, in any point, she could have been the thing to kind of get me over the edge to quit or keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Having that support. And man, we both probably know a lot of folks who have the opposite.
Right. Yeah.
So
And yeah, totally. Yep.
yeah. So having family, friends, as well as business, I've had for a whole bunch of years, different mastermind groups. Right now I'm in 3 different mastermind groups. I've got one with 3 other coaches. We talk once a month for 2 hours to help each other out. Got a group of 12 CEOs. We talk once a month, and I'm trying to build my public speaking business. So me and 2 other professional speakers have another once a month thing. So that doesn't replace one-on-one coaching for you.
Right.
But again, having that support system, I'd say that's number one, and all the other good stuff flows from there.
And I think that, this podcast is so fun for me because it's always serendipitous, because in every moment I get the some insight into directions that I need to look at. I have really been thinking lately about just kind of taking our community and just turning it into basically an entrepreneurial small business owner support company, and really organization, because it's like, I've been a member, and I think I read in your bio, but I've been a member of YPO for 17 years, something like this, right? And so I have my forum group, right? That's what they call it in YPO. Yep. What you're talking about, your mastermind, we call it forum, or they do in YPO. And so, and I had mine yesterday, and again, it was just one of those. We do life together. We meet monthly, and it's about 4 hours that we meet once a month. But we talk about as a business owner, it doesn't matter if you're just starting or been in business, 50 years. There's some loneliness when you're at the top, when you're the person, the woman or the man, when you're where the buck stops. I'll put it that way. If you're the person where the buck stops, there's a certain amount of loneliness, there's a certain amount of isolation, unless you have surrounded yourself with some type of reliable, consistent community of support. To your point, it can't just be some buddies, because a lot of times buddies don't understand, if they have a job, they're not going to understand the pressures and the stress of having to, literally, to your point, do something to pay the mortgage, right? Do something that's, and I can't think of a better, and I'm going to get up on my soapbox here a little bit, so thank you for the airtime, but I can't think of a better group of people to support than the people who are creating the most jobs in this country anyway, are small business owners. It's not, and that's if you've ever been around business at all, you look at it statistically, small businesses create, I think it's 80% of the jobs in this country. And yet I just don't see a ton. I know myself, I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. And what you talked about, just, I think, is the hammer hitting the nail on the head, which is, you got to have that support system, because without that support system, you make decisions and that are in isolation, that aren't full. You're not getting the full view of all of the information you could have when you have a consistent support structure, right? That's not, I even, the thing about mastermind groups typically, or in our situation, my situation, the forum, is these people can be very objective because they don't have any stake other than what is best for me, right? There's no ulterior motives. There's no, they're not trying to get my business. It doesn't work that way, right? We sign a thing that says we're not going to do business together, right? Because you want that true support. So I think it's so, this has really been on my mind for about several months, if not longer. But I just thought it is very lonely proposition if you don't have that community. And for a lot of, especially small entrepreneurs, and or individual, there's more, probably, what do we call them, solopreneurs? Is that what the term is?
Sure.
There's got to be more solopreneurs than there's ever been in the history of at least the United States right now, because people can work remotely, right? So but where's the support system? Where's the guidance on just basic things? Taxation, What kind of
Let
company
alone
are you
all
going
the
to?
emotional stuff.
Right, without all the emotional stuff, right? And it can be, I think it's the most rewarding and the most challenging thing you can do in your life. One of the most challenging is owning your own deal, right? Owning
Yeah,
your own
I tell
company, running
people
your own stuff.
that again, I've been on this entrepreneurial journey for 18 years now.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And I tell people that 18 years ago, if I knew all of the challenges, and I
Yeah.
went through about 7 years of financial hell.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
If I knew all of the challenges, I never would have done it. Now, but
Right.
here's the important part. Looking back from where I am now, I have a wonderful business. I never want to retire. It
Right.
is lucrative. I always
Yeah.
want to grow it, but I'm living a
Right.
pretty good life right now.
Right.
I look back at it now and say, there is no doubt that was the best
Right.
decision I ever made in my life. I can't believe the life I'm living and what I get to
Right.
do. But man, if I didn't have the right support system around me, and initially I didn't, other than my wife, I didn't, then I
Right.
built it up. If I didn't have the right support system around me, I'd be one of those folks in a job I didn't like very much, just counting the years until retirement. And I think that's a pretty sad way to live.
Totally. And so you just to me said, yes, I will help support that community of entrepreneurs. So thank you for that.
And
I
there you
appreciate
go.
that, Mike. That
I'm
was
signing right now.
Yeah, exactly. You signed up. I don't know how you can support, but I know you can in many, many ways. Right. But yeah, I think
I'd love to.
there just needs to be something, because I look, there's EO, there's YPO, there's Vistage, there's so many great organizations out there, and they're really great organizations, but they typically, they're typically serving people that have a little bit, even though they're technically small businesses. But, if you technically the SBA says if you have 500 employees or less, you're a small business. I'm like, at 500 employees, you figured some shit out. I'm just gonna, you probably know how to scale. You got 500 employees, but how do we help those people just coming into that? How do we help business? Maybe business has been around a long time, but are still dealing with the same challenges because you just don't have the bench that you do. I have a company, we have 1,000 employees. We have a bench, right? Somebody gets sick, company's not going to stop running. I mean, there's enough people there that there's enough support structure. But yeah, if you've got a company of one, where's your support structure? And have, how you get sick, what happens, right? Yeah. And so anyway, a little bit now I'm going to throw a curveball, wide curveball, just for my own interest. If you're ready, if you're ready for it.
Hold on.
Okay.
All right. Now I'm ready.
It was in your bio, so it's fair game. Anything in your bio is fair game on the show, right?
All good.
NLP. Why did you do that, and what do you use it for? And
NLP, for if you don't know what NLP
exactly,
is,
it's
neuro-linguistic programming.
Right.
And a buddy of mine in my coaching mastermind group,
love it,
took an amazing course in NLP that he thought, number one, really helped him in his own self-development and managing his emotions. Number two, although he wasn't going out there and teaching NLP to others, it did help him in his coaching of others. And number three, and this is the thing that hooked me 3 or so years ago, maybe close to 4 years ago, is he said that there's part of what he went through is how to train in NLP, even though he didn't want to do that,
right?
Train the trainer thing. And the key there is, he said, it made him what he called a bulletproof public speaker.
Interesting.
It's all about, so I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I give a rip about any of the NLP stuff, but I want to start building the speaking part of my business. And I trust this guy. So I went through, oh my goodness, it was in 2 different trainings in Whistler, British Columbia. It was, I think, 32 days of training. I was out there for, I think, 14 days. And then I was out there.
Oh my gosh.
The most intensive training I've ever been through, to get a whole bunch of NLP certifications. And again, I don't go out there and train in NLP, but the whole lot of that stuff is stick with me. That has helped me immensely as an individual. And I used to help my clients.
Interesting. Yeah, because I do know some NLP practitioners, and the king of NLP, and that or adopted it and used it widespread was Tony Robbins, right? So I remember I was around Tony's group for a while, and there was a lot of NLP practitioners in Tony's group because of the things you mentioned, right? It helps you communicate more effectively, I would say, and helps you navigate things for yourself and other people.
And it helps you understand what those kind of limiting decisions are that you've made about yourself, the emotions that hold you back, and how to get through that. It's really powerful stuff.
Oh, very cool.
I did the Tony Robbins walking on coals stuff.
Oh yeah. Tony was very. It was, I had a business. It was probably 3, 4, 5 years old, and I got into a point where I had some limited success and things were running well, but I had run out of the motivation. So I went to Tony to get motivated, which ended up being, a door into a Pandora's box of a lot of different stuff that I was exposed to in a very positive way. And so, but he obviously studied that NLP stuff, I think, from Bandler back in the day, I think was the guy's name. And
Bandler and Grinder.
Right. Yeah. So he studied from them and then started, using that and has used it to build his whole business around. So it's pretty crazy. But I saw that on there. I was like, well, that's interesting. A business coach that's been trained in NLP. That's not something that you see out there every day.
No.
So I appreciate that you did that, and it shows me that obviously you want to dive deeper into those things. And I think relating it back to being a business owner, your business growth and your personal growth are usually tied hand in hand.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I was going to say my problem, it's not a problem, it's a good thing, but I get really bored every 3, 4, 5 years.
Right.
Yeah. And a few years, I'm bored. I'm going to write a book. So I wrote my second book. I'm going to build a speaking business. My next thing is next Q1 of 2023, which when people listen to this, that may be where we are.
Yeah.
But I'm starting my own podcast. So like
beautiful.
Every year I've got, whether it's a new book or a podcast or starting a speaking business or NLP a few years
ago.
Yeah. I get bored and I just need to do something different.
Yep. And I think that describes most entrepreneurs I know. They need to grow, but and I think it's, it's a healthy thing, because I think, again, that's where job creation happens. That's where wealth creation happens, right? I mean, typically it's the small business owners, it's the entrepreneurs who are impacting their local community. Those are the ones donating to the baseball teams and the churches and giving, sometimes free services for the underserved populations. I mean, it's not, I know that big corporate does, gives money and does good stuff too. I'm not saying they don't, but if you look at a local hometown, it's the people that are in business in those hometowns that have the greatest impact on those communities when it comes to business, I guess. Is the way I look at that.
Also feel like as a coach, the small and mid market, and I do a lot of my work in the mid market.
Yep. Right.
I feel like I could really impact lives there. In the first half of my career, so not only do they impact a lot of people, I feel like as a coach, I could impact them.
Right.
Early in my career, when I was in management consulting, I worked at Fortune 500 companies. I was in Troy, Michigan, doing work for Kmart. 6 months of my life I'll never get back. And, you could like do something crazy good in their business today to save them $30 million, but no one cared. I mean, you put a few pennies in some investors' pockets. The workers were still miserable. When I started working with small and mid-market companies, I would help them do something, improve something, implement something. And the owner would say, you know what, for the first time in 5 years, I'm now able to go on vacation with my wife and kids. It's like, I'm actually impacting people's lives. It's beautiful.
It's good work, right? It's the work. So, well, I appreciate you coming on today, Mike, and I'm sure we'll, invite you to come back on the show anytime you'd like. People can find more about you at mike-goldman.com. That's where your books are, your coaching, you've got some courses out there, but certainly if you'd like more information about Mike, you can go out and check that out. But I really appreciate you coming on today and having the conversation. I enjoyed it.
Matt, thank you. It was fun. I'll definitely come back and work with the mastermind group you build.
I love it. Thank you so much, Mike. All right. Have a good one. Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.